superhero movies were kind of in a unique place. Some of the movies were good and other ones were just a little bit weird. And now that there are a ton of great superhero and comic-based characters being represented in movies nowadays, how does Hellboy, an older franchise that's finally being revisited, hold up nowadays? Today we're doing our review on Hellboy. Let's go ahead and get into this. To start things off, Hellboy's kind of in a weird place as a franchise as a whole. This project early on started as a third movie in the Hellboy trilogy and was supposed to release sometime around 2010. However, that idea kind of got scrapped, but was later placed on the back burner of ideas of movies to be made, and ultimately 11 years after the release of the last Hellboy movie, they decided to just go ahead and do a full-on reboot. And they even casted David Harbour, who's known for his role in Stranger Things, as the lead character. And David Harbour has a reputation of being a fantastic actor, so this looked like it could have had the chemistry to be a really great movie, but ultimately this movie just really fails to impress. And it's really disappointing as a fan of the superhero genre or comic book adaptation genre as a whole in film. We really do enjoy these types of films, and it's always a disappointment when these adaptations just don't turn up as well as we might have anticipated. This movie really just focuses on that whole end of the world trope that's often overdone, but in this case, it just makes the stakes of this overall film seem less believable. The stakes aren't personal enough to make people care about what's happening to the characters in this movie, and where the R-rated aspect of this film could have been a really useful tool, like we've seen it work really well in other movies like Deadpool. It just felt more like they were shooting for an R rating more than actually providing content that fit into the R rating as a whole. Like, in these types of movies, action sequences are really cool, and it's awesome when there's some really cool and creative on screen. And if you look at the comic books, there's some great opportunities to translate some iconic scenes into the movies. However, it just felt like they kind of just jumped to an overkill extent of just trying to shock people with crazy gore and over-the-top badass moments, rather than trying to craft something unique and trying to almost choreograph how these fight scenes and battle scenes come across on camera. Of course, there's a couple moments in this film that are really cool, and some of these bloodbath moments have some kind of might drop your jaw or chuckle because it's awesome, but at the end of the day, it feels like it's lacking something because it's not rooted in any type of storyline or character that feels relevant or relates to audiences at all. It felt oftentimes like the writers didn't necessarily understand who they were writing this movie for and what audience would appreciate this type of movie. Over-the-top violence can be done really well. Look at scenes from movies like John Wick. But this movie just falls into kind of that stereotypical, this is a comic book adaptation, and honestly, some of the CGI was really unimpressive. It just kind of felt like the same old bad CGI, especially that DC is typically associated with, and it's kind of a shame that the poor CGI is really translated into this movie, even though it's not a DC movie. The saddest thing about this movie is that it looks like from the start there was some serious considerations made, and there was an attempt to make something good. Casting David Harbour shows a knowledgeable casting decision, and some of the practical effects that were used look really, really good. And there were some decisions that were made in this film that translate well. It's just, this movie's just bogged down by a pretty bad script and just a lot of really odd decisions with what they were trying to do in a storytelling sense. Some of the visuals do look amazing, it just doesn't necessarily redeem this movie for what it is, especially when just a decade ago there were 2 Hellboy movies that at least had some sort of good writing attached to it. There was at least this characteristic behind who these characters we were following were, and there was this wit and underlying comedy that kind of went with it, and people related to that, where this, it just often feels like the narrative structure falls flat a lot of the time. Like, we really do like some of the visuals they did and the gore, and even though the CGI can kind of mix from really good to really awful, it just felt like as a whole there was something missing in this film, and just kind of a root theme that could have really tied the film together and made it feel like it became something full circle or something greater than itself from beginning to end. But by the end of the film, you feel like you didn't really have anything to take away from the story that was told, and that's really the most disappointing part, especially because there's so many other comic book adaptation films out there that take on these really abstract characters in a much better way than what we saw in this adaptation of Hellboy, and it almost makes us wish that we would have gotten that 3rd movie rather than what we ended up getting in this weird reboot that no one really asked for. And it honestly doesn't look like we're the only ones who have these opinions on this movie. If you look at the reviews that other critics are saying about the film, it just falls into the same trope that we were worried about when this movie was announced. It's 2019. Superhero movies and comic book adaptations do work on film when they're done correctly. We've seen some of the greatest films in this genre come from Marvel, and even DC is catching up and making some decent films with the newer Aquaman movie and Shazam, but Dark Horse, this adaptation, is just really something that falls flat, and it almost feels like they're relying on people knowing who Hellboy was from the original movies that came out a decade ago, and then they don't perform in the same way as people would have expected. Sure, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is a behemoth in the film industry, but the connected universe only works because each individual character was developed enough on their own where people cared about the Tony Starks and the Steve Rogers and the Bruce Banners more than just having Iron Man or having Captain America or having the Hulk. If there isn't an interesting story to take away or an interesting character that has their own motives and passions rather than just flooding a movie with on-screen gore, there isn't going to be a very good takeaway from it, or there isn't going to be a good audience reaction. And worst of all, other than some of the visual scenes and just kind of the fight scenes that were over the top, kind of like a Doom video game, it's actually kind of boring for an action movie. That's never a good thing. Just the reliance on shock value and having a character come across as badass doesn't necessarily lead for a badass movie. And that's not even really getting into any of the pacing issues that this film also had. It felt like at times the movie was going at a complete slog, and then when we get to some of those high intensity scenes, they feel uneven or unbalanced or unexpected, but not in a good way. Overall, if you were on the fence of seeing this movie, you could probably give it a pass. Of course, if you're a die-hard Hellboy fan, you could watch it. There are some things to like. Like we said, David Harbour in general is a great actor, and he was faced with obviously a pretty bad script. But, I mean, some of the action scenes are cool. They're kind of fun. Like, I could really go back and watch these when they're uploaded on YouTube and get the same experience. But for a casual viewer who's maybe on the fence of seeing this movie and wondering if they should spend money to go see this movie in theaters, honestly, there's a lot better superhero movies in theaters right now that you could see, like Shazam, Captain Marvel, or Avengers Endgame, which comes out in just a couple weeks. Honestly, save your money. It'll probably end up being free to watch on television in a couple months anyways. HBO might pick it up or something. But overall, we really like to hear your guys' opinion on these movies as a whole. Were you a fan of the original 2 movies that came out back in the day, or are you kind of on board with this reboot? Are we missing a certain point that you guys really feel strongly about? We really like to know what you guys are thinking in the comment section down below, and we'd like to have this ongoing discussion with all of the movies that we take a look at. Alright, that's it for today. What did you guys think of this movie? Were you a fan of it? What were your opinions just even before you've seen this movie? Do you think it's a good idea to see movies like this being put back on the big screen again in a new way? Let us know what you think down below, and be sure to subscribe for more videos just like this. We'll see you all next time with a brand new video.
What's up, Dorito?
Then, better late than never, Captain America, Chris Evans, crashes the interview. Hugs all around, but hey, where's Roxy?
I'm sorry.
Chris Evans.
You two are.
Hi.
You both are relevant. Great.
Okay. This interview actually ended 2 minutes ago. We just.
Kyle, enjoy this Team Iron wannabe man, but the right team is the only team, Cap.
No negativity from me.
Are you a baby? Oh wow. Are you Avery? You're a pretty girl. Yes. Are you happy?
Hey guys, we hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did, make sure you guys hit the like button down below and subscribe for more Film Artsy. If you guys want to showcase your talent to the world, Film Artsy is the best place for you guys to do it. Please submit your videos to filmartsyofficial@gmail.com, or you guys can click the link in the description. We really want to see what kind of talent you guys can provide. So let us know, send us an email, and we'll check out your videos, and we'll see you all in the next video.
Talking.
I'm about to.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, everybody. How you doing?